When I was younger, my mom and I used to ride our bikes around my neighborhood together. One day, we decided to pick some stuff up at the local grocery store. When I was walking down the aisle, a man approached my mom and I. He was tall and bald. I can't remember much about his appearance. I was about 13 years old. He asked my mom if she had any other children, to which she replied, yes. However, keep in mind all she said was she had a 4-year-old. Anyhow, the man gave her some business card and told me to have a nice day. He seemed so nice. About a week later, my mom and I were at the store again, and yes, we rode our bikes there. The man was there, but he was walking around with an empty shopping cart. He called out to my mom, but my mom kept nudging me to leave. "Elizabeth, wait!" he yelled. He approached us and asked how my brother Sebastian was. My mom said he was fine, but we were in a hurry, so she told him we had to leave. She had a panicked look in her face when we got outside, so I asked her what was wrong. She told me that she never told him my brother's name. That's when things started getting weird. Later that night, we went back to the store in a car this time. It was raining, but we never got to buy anything earlier because we left. When we got there, the man was still there. He was still walking around with an empty shopping cart. My mom was creeped out, so she told me we'd come back in the morning. When we got to the car, it was freezing, so while we were waiting for the car to heat up, someone knocked on the car window. It was the man. I started screaming and my mom put the car in reverse. When she reversed, the man ran in front of the car. She lowered her window a bit and told him to leave. "I just want to talk to you," he shouted, but my mom just drove around him. Finally, the next morning, we decided to go back to the store. We walked there this time. When we got there, the strange man was there. My mom went up to a security guard and told him everything. The security guard said he noticed the man a while back and has been waiting for someone to make a complaint. He said he knew exactly who the man was. It turns out he was just released from a mental hospital and his son was in jail for rape. He told us that he always comes to hit on women and stays there all day without ever buying anything. The officer then made a call and told us he'd watch out for the man to make sure he didn't follow us out. When we were crossing the street out of the grocery store parking lot, about 7 cop cars pulled up in front of the store. The next time we went to the store, my mom asked the security guard what happened, and he told us that the man was taken into custody because he had stolen a gun on him, and they had a warrant to search his place, but that's all. This happened to me just yesterday, and I was so shaken afterwards that I cried and shook uncontrollably. I live about 40 minutes away from the closest town. I am in what is actually considered a village. My family and I make the commute about once a week because gas and groceries out here are insanely expensive. For the most part, we have mapped out the places we prefer to shop to avoid crowds and tweakers, because in our area, there happens to be a lot of them. My husband and I were just about to head home when I remembered that we needed a couple of things for dinner. We drove to the grocery store that we preferred, as it was in the center of town, and most of the shoppers were usually parents with small children or elderly, since it was near several schools and shopping centers. Our toddler was asleep in her car seat, so I volunteered to run inside alone really fast to grab the food so he could wait in the car so we wouldn't have to wake her up. I've never had any problems with shopping by myself, especially not in this store. I think it might be relevant to the story to note that I'm 4'11", about 120 pounds, and 6 months pregnant. I'm not an imposing person, and I keep to myself for the most part. It may have been why he targeted me. I rushed through the store. I grabbed a couple of items I knew I would need for dinner for the next couple of days, but the entire visit took less than 5 minutes. I vaguely remembered seeing a man in a puffy camo jacket in the bread aisle, but I didn't even glance at him as I hurried past. Apparently, he felt a connection. However, I skipped over the rest of the store, not lingering, because I was tired and nauseous. I walked to the milk coolers, which in this store were individual doors that you needed to step into to get what you needed. I stepped away from my cart and got on my tippy toes to grab my milk. When I stepped down, however, a man who smelled like body odor, stale alcohol, and cigarette smoke was so close to me that my backside was flush to his front. I couldn't even turn around to see his face because he was basically holding me against the shelves. I heard a surprisingly nasally voice in my ear say,
"Oh, hello,"
as if I had just given him a lap dance. He squeezed against me closer, and I felt his excitement against my back. My ears started ringing, and I ducked under his blocking arm to see it was covered in the camo puffy jacket. I walked as quickly as I could to my cart, away from him, my heart pounding, and I heard him say something unintelligible. I wasn't sure if it was directed to me, but I didn't care. I walked through the closest aisle to the front of the store, and he didn't follow me down. However, the registers were at the entrance of the store, and the milk was in the back, so as I walked to the front, I noticed that A, this man was following me parallel to the aisles, opposite of the store with a frightening smile the whole time, and B, he had to have gone through the store twice now and didn't have a single item in his hands. I went to the only open register, and the girl working it must have seen the panicked look on my face. I unloaded my few items onto the belt, praying he wasn't going to check out with me. The girl, in her late teens, asked me if I was okay. I shook my head. She rang me up quickly, and I managed to mutter to her that I was being followed, and if she could make sure he didn't follow me to my car. She had noticed him staring at the same can of soda for the entirety of my purchase in the aisle closest to the register we were in. She nodded, and I grabbed my bags and nearly ran out of the store. I didn't see if he was behind me or not. As my husband drove us away, I saw the man leave the store searching the parking lot, still with nothing in his hands. So Mr. Grocery Store Creep, let's never, ever, ever meet, ever. This unsettling encounter happened when I was 11. I should mention that I was not a mature 11-year-old, as in I was still very much a little kid at that age and definitely looked the part. Messy hair, small and giggly, no signs of puberty yet, scraped knees, etc. So there was no way anyone could possibly mistake me for anything but a little kid, which is important to the story. Anyway, my mom took me grocery shopping with her one evening. We were in the meat department when all of a sudden one of the employees came up to us and started chatting up my mom. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s, and he was asking my mom all kinds of questions about me, how old I was, where I went to school, if I had a daddy, and he kept staring at me and saying what a beautiful little girl I was. I just thought he was being nice, and I couldn't understand why my mom seemed so bothered. He followed us around the store while we shopped and kept talking to her even though my mom was clearly trying to ignore him. He kept asking where I went to school, and my mom would only say, "I don't know the name of her school." I interrupted and said, "I go to Catterton Elementary, Mom. You know that." Not realizing why she was playing dumb, he smiled, knelt down, and asked if he could hold me then. My mom just grabbed my hand and started power walking away while pushing the cart with her other hand. By now I knew something was wrong and I was getting scared. I'd never seen my mom like this before. She was tight-lipped and pale, and she positively radiated anger. She quickly paid for our groceries and dragged me out of the store. He followed us to the car. He asked my mom if we needed help loading our groceries in the trunk, and she just snapped. She yelled at him to leave us alone or else she would call the manager. He finally backed off, and on the ride home, I got yelled at for telling him what school I went to. My mom was nearly in tears at this point, and she told me that he was a dangerous person and to tell my teacher right away if I ever saw him in or around my school. She had always taken me to school and picked me up, but she walked me inside to and from class after that. It took me many years to figure out that that guy was a pedophile, and he wanted to know where I went to school so he could abduct me. This story takes place when I was 17 and working as a cashier in a discount grocery store. We got customers from all walks of life and often would encounter some pretty strange people. Hey, everyone needs to eat, right? I was working a closing shift and there was only one other cashier who was on the other side of the checkout lanes. With our 20-something manager locked up in the small office on the other side of the store, our store was too small to have a customer service desk, so if anyone needed a refund, they would have to meet my manager in lane 1, the furthest lane from me. It was a slow night and I was bored, but I perked up when I saw a customer approach my lane. He was a middle-aged man who was balding, tall, and considerably heavy-set. I started my usual cheerful script, saying hello and asking how he was. Usually customers responded pleasantly and the conversation rarely goes beyond pleasantries. This guy, however, picked up a prepaid phone card and launches into a one-sided chatter about how his phone plan was terrible. His phone was locked previously and he simply had no luck. He told me he had a friend fix it and triumphantly takes out his phone and starts to shove it in front of my face, forcing me to look at the screen. I register that the wallpaper on the phone is a picture of two little girls sitting in a bathtub. It was then that I have a good look at this guy and was unnerved. His eyes just seemed vacant. He starts to point at the phone and tells me that the girls are his daughters and that they are 3 and 5. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. He then points to the smaller girl in the picture and says, "I'm getting custody of her next week." Oh, that's, nice. He lights up and gestures through the windows to his van that he is parked directly in front of the store. Actually, my daughter is sitting in the car right now. Do you want me to bring her around to meet you? I think you would be the best of friends. I was thrown off by this, so I nervously said something about it being busy at night at the store and that I had work to do. He then asked me if I lived in the neighboring city. I told him yes because I didn't want him to know where I actually lived. I finished his order as fast as I could and it took him a long time to leave. It's not 5 minutes after this that I am arranging a display of flowers and I turn around to see the exact same man within inches of me. I tried to back up while asking him if there was a problem. He was much larger than I was, at 5'2", 110 pounds, and he matched every movement I made, staying close enough to breathe on me. He huffed angrily that he needed a refund as I sold him the wrong phone card. I told him to go to the first register, but instead of leaving, he just stayed where he was, staring at me. I started to walk back to my lane, and instead of going in the other direction, he followed me closely while still hovering over and breathing on me. I hurriedly called my manager and the man reluctantly started walking towards lane 1. It's then that I hear him screaming at my manager since she couldn't refund phone cards, yelling insistently about how his daughter was in the car and that he had to waste his time over this bullshit. During the commotion, I told one of the grocery guys what happened, and he looked out the window through to his vehicle. Didn't he say he had a kid in the car? Yes. His car is empty. I felt chills, and the man walked towards the exit. He looked at me and just said, "See you later." He then got into his car and left the engine running for 20 minutes. My shift was over, but I was afraid to go outside the store by myself. I called my dad to come and get me and told him what was up. When my dad showed up, the man peeled out of the parking lot. This man would occasionally show up and buy a few small items, stalling as much as possible so he could talk to the cashiers. He would then leave and come back and repeat the process upwards of 5 times in a day. I told my managers about him and they told me they could do nothing, so I just did my best to avoid him. Another time, however, I was finishing up my break in the break room and found myself blocked as I tried to exit the room. It was the guy. I immediately stepped back and grabbed the phone on the wall. "What are you doing here? The area is off limits to customers." "My daughter is using the bathroom. You look nice today." I didn't believe him until a small girl stepped towards us. "Look, honey, it's your new friend. Go say hello." This little girl ran up to me and hugged my leg tight, while he used the opportunity to get even closer to me. I was really frightened at this point and shook myself free, practically bolting out of the room. As much as I complained, he was never banned from the store, and they told me there was no reason to notify the police. Just before I left that job, one of my coworkers told me that man had tried to follow her home, driving up ahead of her and stopping the car to wait for her to pass him on foot, and then repeating. She panicked and wound up jumping the side gate of a house, going through people's backyards to get away from him. We tried to get the police involved, but nothing ever came of it.